Did you realize the NES Classic Edition was released almost 6 years ago? I mean, actually, it's about 5.5, but this November, it's going to be a solid 6 years. Time flies. I mean, it seriously feels like it wasn't that long ago. Now, the NES Classic wasn't the first mini or emulation console to be released, but it was the one to really kick off the craze. It was extremely hyped at that time. And within the first few months, Nintendo sold over 2 million units. It was nuts, and it was extremely difficult to get one. I remember going to my local Walmart, and the line was really long. They had previously told us what time they were going to sell them, but someone at the store, an employee obviously, started selling a few of them earlier before I'm assuming management had stopped them and said, hey, we're holding them for this time type of thing. So at that time when I showed up, they only had a small handful for when they advertised they were going to sell them. So I left because I wasn't going to get one there, and I went to GameStop, which is right down the street. Now, they didn't have much of a line at that time of morning as they weren't opening for a couple more hours, but they did have an employee there to keep things civil, it seemed. They were letting us know how many they had and how pretty much if you wanted a second controller, you were screwed as they supposedly only had maybe 2 in stock. I still call BS on that. I think they held them for themselves. Now, we waited anxiously and hyped as all hell. An official Nintendo emulation device? Why not? Now, while waiting impatiently with my kids for the NES Classic, I recall a guy that I saw at Walmart's line show up shortly before the GameStop opened with his crew of family and friends, thinking they were going to buy them out as they had someone in the front holding them a spot. I overheard them talking about how they grabbed a few from Walmart and were hoping to get more as they were being resold for ridiculous amounts of money on the secondary market already. Yeah, things haven't changed with these types of people. Bunch of asshats ruining it for people who really were looking forward to getting one. I think even with most of us in line hearing all this nonsense, we didn't have to object to this BS line holding, cutting, scalper nonsense because the amount they had that they told us was still enough to fulfill all of us, including those pudwacks who jumped the line. Now, it was still a crappy thought, though. What if they don't really have enough, and these jerks grab them all to resell? Are we going to jump them and grab their NESs and run away? I don't know. You know, people were there constantly recounting the line, making sure they were good, and then telling, like, new people to the line that they were screwed. Of course, most of the new people to the line didn't believe it, and they stayed until a GameStop employee came back out and confirmed the numbers and told them they wouldn't get one. So then people started to rush the lineup at Best Buy once they got turned away. Best Buy was right there as well. Didn't really think of that as an option. I think I was looking at who opened first, right? That's why I went to Walmart, because they were going to sell them earlier, and then GameStop, then Best Buy. Now, it was an interesting time, and one of the last times I recall actually lining up somewhere to buy a video game item. Now, the NES Classic Edition was also kind of a controversial thing at the time, along with amiibos. A lot of people accused Nintendo of artificial scarcity, pretty much a business tactic to cause fear of missing out and keeping the company's name and products relevant for longer, right? People wanting to get them. I think officially Nintendo had addressed it as more of a, hey, we only produced so much because we didn't know how much interest there would actually be in a device like this. But I think the timing of it all was really a plan to further Nintendo's chances of making a comeback off of the not-so-great sales of the Wii U. Got to remember, the launch of the Nintendo Switch was coming up the following year, just a few short months. Who knew how well the Switch was going to do? Who knew how it would be perceived by everyone? Maybe this was a chance to make people think, crap, this NES thing was hard to get. The Switch will probably be hard to get as well, so then that fear of missing out kicks in for those who may not have been completely interested. Now, obviously, this is all just speculation on my part, but I really have a feeling that NES Classic was a ploy to keep Nintendo's name in people's minds for business purposes down the road. Just kind of makes sense to me. So the Switch released in March of the following year, and then a month after that, they announced the NES Classic was discontinued. That's really interesting. With such a huge demand for this thing, it all seemed fairly odd. Does Nintendo not like our money? I mean, sometimes it seems that way. But I have like this strong feeling that they know what they're doing, and they plan these things out. So about a year after the NES Classic, they reproduced this mess of a release with the Super Nintendo Classic Edition. So, of course, the Super Nintendo Classic sold extremely well and became very difficult to find also. I mean, the scalpers were on the prowl with that one. Like, holy crap, the NES Classic, now the Super Nintendo Classic. We got to double our efforts to grab these and resell them type of thing, right? So it sold out, got discontinued type of thing. And then a year later, they announced a limited restock of both the NES and the Super Nintendo Classic because people who couldn't get their hands on one were still itching to get one. They didn't want to pay double, triple, quadruple the price. It was ridiculous. It was nuts. But yeah, they had a limited restock. It came out that year, 2018, for about a half a year, and then they discontinued it again. And now, just secondary market if you want to find one of these things, right? So the future of Nintendo's Classic Edition line of consoles, there's been a lot of rumors for the past few years with talks circulating about a Game Boy Classic. Do you remember that? Which, that became even more confusing as a new Game Boy patent was found from Nintendo concerning a device that looks like a Game Boy, but it was like a cell phone case that had buttons and a D-pad built into it. This was back in October of 2018, so it's been a while. We haven't seen or heard anything concerning this or a possible mini Game Boy at all. Now, we've had the Game & Watch, like, you know, come out, the Mario one and the Zelda one, but no mini Game Boy. Now, also another big one was the N64 Classic. Lots of speculation and rumors with that one as well. And I was always kind of wary and skeptical, but also hopeful of a N64 Classic Edition. But yeah, that never happened. But they did wind up giving you the option to pay more than double your Switch Online subscription price late last year to be able to play some Nintendo 64 ROMs. Not own them, just get access to them for, you know, paying a fee. Kind of like Netflix, right? You can watch as long as you pay. You own nothing. Don't pay, you don't play. They also released a wireless Nintendo 64 controller for the Switch, which I think is pretty awesome, but that hasn't been restocked in a little while now, and a lot of people haven't been able to get their hands on them. So, yeah, I really have my doubts that Nintendo's going to be revisiting any of these Classic Edition consoles anytime in the future, unless that is, if the Switch wasn't as much of a success as it was, maybe. But I think with how well the Switch has been doing, they don't really need to rely on these little side projects as much. You know, yeah, the Game & Watches have come out and a few other limited time type things, but I feel these Classic Edition consoles, it was really the timing of it all. There was plans behind those releases, right? I mean, you know, reminiscing about the NES Classic, it's kind of odd, but it was an odd time, so it just kind of makes sense. It was a really cool device with some, you know, crappy flaws, like an extremely short controller cable, and only coming with one controller, despite a good number of the included games being multiplayer. I mean, finding an extra controller was even more difficult at the time than finding the actual console. Also, if you wanted to go back to the menu to select a game or create a save state, you had to press the reset button on the actual console on the NES Classic Edition. I guess with the stock controller cable being so short, you would be right next to the console anyway, so maybe Nintendo didn't see a problem. Kind of ridiculous, but, you know, with some of these issues, we did find ways around all that. Controller cable extensions, wireless controllers, and plenty of other accessories from third parties were released back then. And also, the biggest thing, Hack-Chi, adding games, modding, and customizing the console became a reality fairly shortly after the release of the NES Classic. So I still have my, you know, NES Classic Edition I bought from GameStop the morning of release, and I do love it. It stayed with me. I really enjoy the thing. I play it every great once in a while, and, you know, I do realize it may not be the best option to play NES games. You know, I think it's still an excellent, fairly well polished and presented option, though. We have tons of other ways to play NES that gives us a lot more freedom with customization and just options, but I think there's something really cool about having a small NES replica officially from Nintendo. And also, Those 30 games that are included, officially anyway, I mean, like I said, you could add games, but those 30 games that they officially included will always be available to me. Unlike the NES games that are on the Switch Online subscription service. Yeah, I mean, we could complain for days about a virtual console being able to buy some games and keeping them type of thing, but there's so many options out there. But, you know, like I said, sometimes it seems like Nintendo doesn't want our money, but I think they know what they're doing. Appreciate you guys. Catch you next time. Bye.